That night, as the last faint whisper of my mother's breath left her body, I sat alone. In the hushed hospital corridor, families embraced, their goodbyes echoing softly. Yet for me, there was only silence. My own relatives, dozens of them, were conspicuously absent. No texts, no missed calls, not even a fabricated excuse. And in the precise instant the heart monitor flattened into a stark line, a nurse pressed a sealed envelope into my trembling hand. That confidential message ignited a chain of events, shattering years of quiet humiliation and forever altering the destiny of our family's most self-important members. My name is Elise. I'm 33 years old, and for a lifetime, I felt like a ghost in my own home. Have you ever witnessed an entire medical powerhouse? A lineage of prominent doctors, skilled surgeons, and powerful hospital executives effortlessly abandon the very woman who sculpted their professional world the moment she could no longer serve their ambitions. 3 months ago, I lived that reality. My mother lay slowly fading at Portland Mercy, while just a few floors above her, my brother, Dr. Nathan Harrington, flawlessly executed his 200th open-heart procedure. My sister, Dr. Caroline Harrington, was 2 blocks away, finalizing a complex new imaging contract in a high-stakes corporate boardroom. Out of 47 relatives, all deeply entrenched in the healthcare industry, not a single one found a spare 60 minutes for the woman who had meticulously cleared their path to sterile white coats and lavish corner offices. They offered no blossoms. They sent no condolences. Their indifference was as palpable as if she'd already been scrubbed from the annals of the Harrington legacy. But they were blissfully unaware of one crucial fact. My mother, in her infinite wisdom, had been meticulously planning for this exact moment for over a decade and a half. The discreet packet the nurse slipped into my palm, just as my mother drew her ultimate breath, contained far more than a simple farewell. It held the undisputed dominion over a sprawling $410 million healthcare network they all mistakenly believed was theirs to control. And today, I'm going to recount the astonishing story of how my dying mother's secret missive transformed me, the family's perceived disappointment, into the formidable force my siblings absolutely never anticipated. If you're watching this right now, please hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're tuning in from. I genuinely read every comment, especially from those who have always felt like the outsider in a highly ambitious family. The Harrington name carries significant weight in Portland. For 3 successive generations, it has been boldly emblazoned across hospital wings, acknowledged in prestigious research publications, and showcased on exclusive gala invitations. My grandfather initiated the very first Harrington Clinic back in 1951, a humble brick structure perpetually scented with antiseptic and freshly brewed coffee. Over 70 years, that single clinic blossomed into the Harrington Health System, an intricate network of a dozen state-of-the-art facilities. Collectively valued at approximately $420 million, spread throughout the great state of Oregon. The narrative my family prefers to champion is that we painstakingly constructed this empire with sheer surgical precision and unwavering self-sacrifice. The inconvenient truth they conveniently omit is just how much of its grandeur was meticulously engineered by my mother's extraordinary intellect. Nathan, at 42, is the gleaming gem they relentlessly polish. He's the one journalists eagerly quote, the one patients specifically request by name, the one whose glossy magazine features adorn the long hallway of our childhood residence in Ridgewood Hills. Photographs of him beaming alongside state governors, images of him cradling infants following intricate surgical procedures, pictures of gleaming plaques, heavy trophies, and stern-looking, engraved accolades. Every family gathering reliably begins the same way. Aunt Dana, did you happen to catch Nathan's spotlight in Northwest Cardio Monthly? Our Nathan just returned from an exclusive conference in New York, where he was the keynote speaker. They say he miraculously rescued another impossible situation last week. The surgical team insists no one else could have managed it. The entire table lavishes him with praise as if their very breath depended upon it. Then enters Caroline, 38, the chief administrative officer at Sierra Valley Medical Center, which stands as the largest private hospital in the entire region. She is the darling of every corporate board, the one who transforms dry statistical graphs into heroic sagas, the one who resurrected a floundering facility into a shining beacon of performance in merely 18 months. She converses about operating margins and intricate payer mixes with the same casual ease most people discuss their holiday plans. At festive seasonal dinners, she'll nonchalantly drop mentions of having lunch with the city's mayor, or the prestigious panel she's moderating at a Harvard healthcare symposium, or the new consulting firm practically begging her to join their elite leadership team. And then, almost as an afterthought, someone's gaze eventually lands on me. "And Elise, what exactly are you involved with these days, dear?" "Something to do with mobile applications. I am not a surgeon. I do not oversee the operations of a hospital. My name is not etched into a grand marble monument. I hold the position of Director of Strategic Technology at Arcturus Systems, a Fortune 500 tech giant whose innovative products most of my relatives, quite frankly, pretend not to comprehend. My work functions discreetly beneath the sleek interfaces doctors navigate and the complex dashboards administrators meticulously scrutinize. I architect cutting-edge healthcare AI models that swiftly identify rare medical conditions and flag perilous patterns across countless patient records. I craft the invisible backbone. So naturally, within my family's orbit, I am the one no one truly acknowledges. Nathan enjoys remarking, "Anyone can dabble with computers, Elise. But can you literally hold a human heart in your palm?" The unspoken implication is perpetually identical. What I accomplish is inferior. What I contribute holds no real significance. My efforts are merely a side effect, never the core remedy. The crushing irony, which none of them ever seemed remotely interested in grasping, is that while they were individually rescuing lives one surgical procedure at a time, I was diligently developing complex systems capable of preserving countless lives they would never even be aware of. Yet, in the Harrington family lexicon, a talent lacking a stethoscope attached to it might as well be classified as a mere pastime. The inquiry that gnawed at me for years was both straightforward and unyielding. If my presence held such negligible importance to them, why did my mother reserve her final, most lucid moments exclusively for me? Why did she specifically instruct the nurse to wait until the monitor went silent before entrusting that sealed letter to my care? Why summon the perceived disappointment to her bedside instead of her celebrated prodigies? I didn't open the letter within the confines of the hospital room. I carefully tucked it into my bag and departed, walking past the bustling nurses' station, past a solemn cluster of families huddled in hushed sorrow, past the volunteer desk, adorned with its bowl of hard candies and brochures on bereavement. Outside, the Portland sky maintained its characteristic muted gray, heavy clouds suspended low over Harbor Point Bay. The city pulsed onward, oblivious that the woman who had quietly sculpted its entire healthcare landscape was no more. Automobiles blared their horns. A bus exhaled its final sigh at the curb. Somewhere, within one of our 12 sprawling facilities, a receptionist was undoubtedly still answering the telephone with the familiar greeting, "Thank you for contacting Harrington Health." I stood motionless on the sidewalk for an extended moment, then realized my phone was alight with notifications from a group chat ominously labeled Harrington Family. Not a single one of them pertained to my mother. There were snapshots from a surgical conference held in Chicago, a link to an article quoting Nathan on the latest advancements in cardiac imaging, a triumphant boast about Caroline's new advisory role on a national hospital council. I scrolled endlessly, desperately, and discovered precisely one message acknowledging my mother's passing. It was from Lee, my cousin, who worked grueling night shifts as a nurse in one of our satellite clinics. "I'm so deeply sorry, Elise. If you require anything at all, please call me, okay?" 46 medical professionals bearing our prestigious surname had offered nothing. I silenced my phone. I didn't weep until I reached my apartment, until the front door of my modest dwelling clicked shut behind me, and the profound quiet became an unbearable roar. I sank onto the sofa, the enigmatic envelope resting on my lap, and finally broke the delicate seal. The correspondence within was meticulously handwritten on my mother's personal stationery. The exquisite cream-colored paper she reserved exclusively for wedding announcements and momentous life decisions. Her elegant script, typically flawless, wavered in certain sections, but it was undeniably hers. "My dearest Elise, if you are reading this, It signifies that I am no longer present to act as a buffer between you and the very individuals who have, for years, willfully chosen not to perceive you clearly. You are, in all likelihood, alone. Your brother and sister are probably somewhere, being lauded and celebrated. That is perfectly acceptable. I purposefully engineered this. They mistakenly believe our family's narrative revolves around surgical feats and grand hospital expansions. I know the unvarnished truth. Our collective story is fundamentally about systems. It has always been so. You were the singular individual who grasped that without the appropriate systems in place, the scalpel possesses very little true power. My mother's letter continued with an unwavering resolve that strikingly contrasted the fragility of her final week. Each carefully penned sentence felt like a profound revelation. Each paragraph, a truth she had diligently concealed for reasons I was only now beginning to comprehend. You were never the disappointment, Elise. You were the only one who foresaw the world as it was rapidly evolving, not as it once was. My throat constricted. I persevered, devouring every word. Your brother and sister possess undeniable talent. They are driven by immense passion, but they cannot perceive beyond the immediate confines before them. You, however, do. You always have. That is precisely why I have entrusted the future of our family's life's work into your capable hands. A second sheet of paper accompanied the letter. It contained a precise roster of 5 names: Rachel Whitfield from Heritage Private Wealth, Thomas Albright, an esteemed estate attorney, Dr. Henry Lawson, an independent board member, Andrew Mercer from Atlas Innovation Capital, and Linda Roberts, a civil auditor for Oregon State. All were circled, each marked with a tiny, significant star. At the very bottom, she had carefully inscribed, "These individuals are your staunchest allies. They are already aware. They have been patiently awaiting your arrival." I temporarily ceased breathing, awaiting *me. I hastily turned to the final page. 15 years ago, when you opted for Stanford University over medical school, I envisioned the entirety of your life unfolding before me. You were already discerning what medicine would resemble 2 decades into the future. You were already moving purposefully towards it. I understood that your father would never grasp your vision. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that Nathan and Caroline would ridicule precisely what they secretly feared. Therefore, I implemented measures to safeguard you. She wrote that in 2009, she had discreetly transferred her entire ownership of Harrington Health System into a blind trust administered by Heritage Private Wealth, constituting 38% of the company's total equity, legally under my name. She meticulously elucidated the intricate structure, detailing how it was flawlessly protected, how it deftly circumvented potential family squabbles, and how absolutely no one could reverse it without my explicit consent. I fixated on her signature, her elegant looping M, her carefully crafted Harrington. My mother had constructed an entire hidden architecture beneath my unsuspecting feet, and I had been completely oblivious. At the base of the page, she had added a concluding instruction. Do not reveal this to them until they unequivocally show you their true colors. Then, open every door. I refolded the letter with hands that quivered no more. For the very first time in my life, I wasn't merely standing on the periphery of our family's sprawling legacy. I was firmly positioned at its very core, clutching the bedrock they didn't even realize existed. The subsequent week blurred into a whirlwind of genuine condolences from individuals outside our family circle, juxtaposed with a deafening silence from those within it. I returned to my work at Arcturus Systems, attempting to immerse myself in the intricate world of algorithms and data pipelines. Yet the profound truth relentlessly pulsed beneath every task I undertook. My mother had entrusted me with the immense power to reorient a $420 million empire. I simply hadn't yet determined how to wield it. That critical clarity arrived with a speed I hadn't anticipated during what would undeniably become one of the most profoundly humiliating afternoons of my entire existence. Nathan convened an urgent family meeting to deliberate my mother's estate. It was scheduled at Albright and Associates, a location that, in retrospect, should have served as an ominous harbinger. My family rarely conducts meetings in law offices unless something significant is being parceled out, disposed of, or ruthlessly sacrificed. Upon my arrival at the reception desk on the 47th floor, The initial sight that greeted me was a dense cluster of Harrington relatives congregated in the waiting area. A sea of white coats, official ID badges dangling from lanyards, and that distinct clinical aroma of medical-grade hand sanitizer. Then came the familiar sound, someone laughing, but not a joyful, light-hearted laughter. This was the kind of laughter that stings, the kind that emphatically declares the joke is aimed at someone who isn't privy to it. Caroline stood gracefully among them, as impeccably beautiful and polished as ever, meticulously sifting through a stack of printed spreadsheets. Did you happen to notice her LinkedIn profile, Director of Strategic Technology at Arcturus? A cousin emitted a derisive snort. That's not even actual healthcare, another chimed in. It's healthcare adjacent, someone else clarified, which, essentially, translates to utterly irrelevant. Caroline raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Please, Elise doesn't even grasp the fundamental distinction between operational efficiency and patient outcomes. I caught my name before I fully caught my breath. I stepped forward, and their boisterous chatter abruptly collapsed into a stark silence. Caroline scrutinized me from head to toe in one swift, heavily judgmental glance. "Oh, Elise, you actually made it." "As Mom requested," I stated flatly. She offered a subtle smile that failed to reach her eyes. "Of course." Nathan unlatched the conference room door, his posture rigid, his jaw clenched tight. "We're commencing," he announced. "Let's ensure this is efficient." Efficient? Nathan's favorite declaration when he was on the verge of steamrolling someone. Inside, the lengthy walnut table gleamed under the harsh ceiling lights. The blinds were half closed, imbuing the room with a stifling, oppressive quality I recognized from years of feeling insignificant in spaces where my family consumed far too much air. I chose a seat at the furthest end. Nathan didn't explicitly tell me to relocate, but his silent indifference served as tacit permission for everyone else. Mrs. Harrington remained meticulously lucid until her very last moment. The palpable tension within the room intensified. Then arrived the pivotal instant I would mentally reenact for weeks to come. Nathan retrieved his personal checkbook. He hastily scrawled a sum, ripped out the page, and advanced towards me with the swagger of a man bestowing charity. "Here," he declared, thrusting the check forward. "Take $50,000. Vacate this meeting. Entrust the business deliberations to those who possess the requisite understanding." My heartbeat thrummed in my ears. $50,000, the apparent cost of my silence. Caroline folded her arms. "It's quite generous, Elise. It's $50,000 more than you're actually contributing." I fixed my gaze on the check, then on both of them. On the 47 relatives whose expressions spanned the spectrum from detached amusement to utter boredom. "Is this truly what you think of me?" I inquired softly. "Realistically," Nathan affirmed, "yes." And in that moment, something deep within me irrevocably shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was an astonishing clarity. The kind that descends sharp and unblemished, like a definitive medical diagnosis. "No," I countered, pushing the check firmly back into his hand. "I'm staying." The entire room froze. Caroline exhaled audibly, as if burdened by my obstinacy. "This is becoming embarrassing," she mumbled. But the true embarrassment was not mine. A gentle vibration hummed in my pocket, a call from Andrew Mercer. Impeccable timing. I placed it on speaker. "Elise," he stated, "the board has approved the IPO. We require your signature today." Nathan snorted dismissively. "IPO? Don't delude yourself." Andrew's voice acquired a distinct chill. "And who, precisely, is that?" "My brother," I answered. "Dr. Nathan Harrington." Andrew paused momentarily. "Oh," he drawled slowly. "The same Dr. Harrington who is attempting to divest community access to Metatron Global." The room erupted in pandemonium. Nathan stood rigidly, his eyes searing into me as if I had personally detonated a bomb. I ended the call. A profound silence once again enveloped the room. It was then that Albright cleared his throat and carefully lifted an envelope bearing the distinguished seal of Heritage Private Wealth. "Mrs. Harrington bequeathed one final document," he announced. "A transfer of ownership records." Nathan lurched forward too quickly. "There must be some egregious misunderstanding." "There is not," Albright responded calmly, and then he extended the envelope to me. My hands, this time, remained perfectly steady. I broke the seal. I carefully extracted the certificate. I articulated the first line aloud. As of the date of this document, Elise Harrington holds 38% ownership of Harrington Health System. Gasps, hushed whispers, a dropped pen, a full tableau of utter disbelief. Nathan's face became utterly devoid of color. Caroline's lips parted in silent shock. I pressed on, transferred by Margaret Harrington, protected under a blind trust until her passing. The room fractured into a cacophony of noise. Nathan lunged forward. "This is a fraudulent document. It is notarized," Albright stated with unwavering calm, "and entirely legally binding." Every aspect of me that had been dismissed as invisible became irrefutably undeniable in one swift stroke. For 15 long years, they had perceived me as the weakest link in the Harrington chain. They were utterly mistaken. My mother had seen what they stubbornly refused to acknowledge, and now the truth was irrevocably mine. Silence settled over the room like a heavy static charge. One would naturally assume a revelation of this magnitude would detonate instantly, but no. It was the stillness that arrived first. A stunned, electrically charged quiet, the kind that siphons oxygen from the surrounding air and amplifies every heartbeat beyond its natural rhythm. Nathan stared at me as if confronted by a vivid hallucination. Caroline instinctively moved closer to him, as if her mere presence could somehow hold together the version of reality they had both steadfastly believed in for so long. I carefully placed the ownership certificate flat on the polished table. Its intricate, embossed seals gleamed under the overhead lights. Undeniable, unarguable, immovable. "I own 38%, I reiterated softly, allowing the weight of the words to seep into the widening cracks of their composure. Mom ensured it. "You don't even begin to comprehend what that entails," Nathan hissed, his voice barely controlled. "I understand enough," I replied, my voice steady. "I understand that you attempted to offload our entire healthcare system for barely half its true worth to Metatron Global Holdings. I understand the $62 million personal kickback you cunningly tried to conceal. I understand your intention to eradicate every single community program my mother painstakingly established." His jaw clenched so tightly a muscle in his cheek visibly twitched. "You hacked my confidential files." "No," I countered calmly. "I simply secured them after you carelessly left your passwords written in a folder conspicuously labeled important." Someone coughed to mask a stifled laugh. Someone else muttered, "Unbelievable." Caroline positioned herself between us, her palms stiff at her sides. "This changes absolutely nothing," she declared, her voice brittle. "You possess no understanding of the business. You don't grasp medical leadership. Ownership is not synonymous with competence." I met her unwavering gaze without the slightest flinch. "And yet, somehow, competence didn't prevent either of you from steering us directly towards financial collapse." Her eyes widened with indignation. "Excuse me? Look at the metrics," I instructed, retrieving a prepared folder. "Declining patient satisfaction, a surge in malpractice complaints, burnout levels skyrocketing. You label it efficiency, I label it severe mismanagement." Nathan snapped, "You have no right to—" "Actually," Albright interjected, his tone firm, "Ms. Harrington possesses every right. As the majority shareholder, she is entitled to call an emergency vote at any time." Nathan pivoted towards him. "This is a private family matter. This," Albright stated icily, "is a corporate matter." The fissures in Nathan's authority widened into full-blown fractures. I rose from my chair. "This conversation will not conclude here," I announced. "We will resume it publicly at the annual shareholder assembly. The people who genuinely rely on Harrington Health deserve to know precisely what has been transpiring behind these closed doors." Gasps rippled across the room. Nathan's voice dropped to a menacing growl. "You wouldn't dare." "I am not afraid of the truth," I stated. "Are you?" 2 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Kingswell Hotel was awash with a throng of 300 attendees. Influential investors, esteemed physicians, generous donors, critical board members, and eager journalists. The shimmering chandeliers cast golden reflections across the opulent marble floors, and perfectly aligned rows of white chairs curved gracefully in a semicircle around a stage, so polished it mirrored the palpable tension permeating the room. Nathan stood at the podium, his voice smooth, his shoulders squared with an air of feigned confidence. "Under my astute leadership, he declared. Harrington Health System has consistently upheld its unwavering commitment to excellence. He clicked to a new slide, revealing inflated figures and expertly manipulated graphs, a true masterclass in selective truth. Caroline positioned herself gracefully beside him, exuding her characteristic certainty. "We have diligently constructed a sustainable future," she announced. "One guided by unparalleled medical expertise, firmly rooted in time-honored tradition, and expertly steered by those who possess an intimate understanding of the field." My name then materialized behind them, starkly circled in red, "Non-medical shareholder to be removed." A surgically precise excision, intended for all to witness. Cameras flashed incessantly. Whispers rippled through the audience. Nathan raised his chin defiantly. "It is time to vote her out." I rose. My heels clicked against the marble floor in slow, deliberate rhythms as I advanced towards the stage. The spotlight shifted, gracefully following my every step. 300 heads pivoted in unison. And every individual who had once considered me a mere afterthought now stared, transfixed, as if witnessing an unexpected plot twist unfold before their very eyes. "Ms. Harrington," the moderator inquired, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Do you wish to address the room?" "Yes," I affirmed. "I do." Nathan gripped the podium, his knuckles white. "Elise," but the collective attention of the room had already gravitated towards me. I stepped onto the stage beside him, my folder clutched firmly in my hand. "For the past 15 years," I began, my voice clear and steady, "I have been dismissed, my contributions minimized, and treated as utterly irrelevant within the very company my mother helped to painstakingly establish. Today, I stand before you because this esteemed board deserves to hear the unvarnished truth, not the meticulously curated version concealed behind Nathan's charming pronouncements." Caroline scoffed audibly. "You're making a spectacle of yourself." "No," I retorted. "I'm finally being honest." I opened my folder and carefully lifted the first document. "This is the trust transfer, legally signed by Margaret Harrington in 2009, meticulously verified by Heritage Private Wealth, officially filed with the SEC, duly notarized, and entirely legally binding." Albright appeared discreetly beside the stage, projecting the documents onto the colossal screens behind us. Gasps erupted across the room like shattering glass. Nathan lunged towards the microphone. "These are obvious forgeries." "They are not," Albright stated flatly. "We have meticulously verified their authenticity." I continued before Nathan could regain his composure. "I own 38% of this company. Mom entrusted it to me because she had a profound understanding of where medicine was unequivocally headed. She grasped that innovation, equitable access, and social equity held far greater significance than mere vanity and unbridled power." I turned to directly face the audience. "And she foresaw the inherent danger in leaders who would so readily betray her life's dedication for sheer personal profit." Another slide materialized on the screens. Metatron's proposed offer. Nathan's personal payout terms, $62 million, classified as confidential compensation. The room erupted. Voices surged. Reporters furiously typed. Doctors exchanged looks of utter astonishment. Someone shouted, "Is this truly factual?" Someone else yelled, "You attempted to sell us out." Nathan slammed his hand against the podium. "I negotiated this deal for the sake of growth." "Growth?" I echoed, my tone laced with disbelief. Metatron planned to shutter 3 essential community centers, eliminate all charity care provisions, and arbitrarily hike fees by 30%. That, Nathan, is not growth. That is blatant abandonment. Caroline stepped forward, visibly trembling. "You don't comprehend the immense undertaking involved in managing a system of this sheer magnitude." "No," I countered softly. "I comprehend precisely what it entails, and I comprehend what it should absolutely never become." I turned to address the board. I moved to immediately terminate the Metatron merger. A quiet, firm voice resonated from the front row. "I second that motion." It was Dr. Henry Lawson. Hands lifted across the room, board members, senior physicians, investors. "The motion carries," the moderator declared. "The merger is officially terminated." Nathan appeared as if the very floor had vanished beneath his feet. I wasn't finished. I also moved to immediately remove Dr. Nathan Harrington as CEO for egregious breach of fiduciary duty. Chaos erupted. Nathan stormed towards me, "You ungrateful," but the moderator's gavel struck the table with a sharp crack. Order. Votes were cast, one by one, clear, public, irreversible. 72% voted yes. Nathan Harrington was officially removed from his position. He staggered backward, his chest heaving, his face deathly pale. Caroline reached for him, but he brusquely shrugged her off. In the midst of the uproar, I stepped away from the podium and experienced a strange, almost serene tranquility within myself. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel small. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the perpetual disappointment. I was precisely the person my mother had always known I could be, long before anyone else dared to believe it. When the meeting concluded, the ballroom swiftly emptied into a swirling mass of reporters. I discreetly slipped out through a side hallway, my pulse finally beginning to normalize. But Nathan was waiting. His tie was askew, his breathing ragged, his eyes a tumultuous mix of fury and profound hurt. "You utterly destroyed me," he whispered, his voice raw. "No," I countered. "You destroyed yourself. You were meant to remain in your designated place. I found a new one." He glared at me like a complete stranger. "This isn't over." "It is," I replied gently. "And it ended the precise moment you decided that money held more importance than people." He flinched visibly. And in that poignant instant, I realized he wasn't a malicious villain, merely a man who had meticulously constructed his entire identity on being untouchable and simply couldn't endure the moment he no longer was. I walked away, and for the first time, he didn't attempt to stop me. The headlines began to break before I even made it back to my apartment. By the time I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag onto the kitchen counter, my phone was vibrating incessantly. News alerts, missed calls, messages from numbers I hadn't seen in years. Harrington Air ousts brother as CEO, one prominent financial outlet reported. Boardroom revolt saves Portland healthcare system, another proclaimed, a striking photograph from the Kingswell ballroom gracing the top of every article. Nathan mid-stride, his face captured in a blur of unrestrained rage, and me at the podium behind him, perfectly steady, almost eerily calm. Comment sections were already furiously spinning the narrative. Fallen golden sun, overlooked daughter, empire realigned. I placed my phone face down on the table and allowed the persistent vibration to continue until it finally died down on its own. Silence poured into the apartment like warm, soothing water. For the first time in many months, I didn't feel as though I was suffocating. The following morning, Harrington Health System's stock opened nearly 18% higher. Analysts cautiously framed it as relief pricing. Investors enthusiastically described the canceled Metatron merger as a fortunate escape from a disastrous undervaluation. A regional op-ed lauded me as the rare insider willing to torch the bridge rather than witness patients being pushed off it. I watched the numbers relentlessly climb on my laptop from the small desk by my window and knew, with a strange, detached certainty, that something profound and irreversible had transpired. I was no longer a mere footnote in my family's convoluted story. I was the one decisively turning the page. The emergency board meeting convened 3 days after the shareholder assembly. This time, there were no attempts to exclude me, no subtle maneuvers to obstruct my view, no snide jokes at my expense. Everyone arrived punctually. Everyone was attentive. Everyone was noticeably wary. Albright sat near the head of the table, his legal pad open, his pen poised. Dr. Henry Lawson occupied his customary seat, hands folded, his expression vigilant. Representatives from Heritage Private Wealth and 2 major insurers participated via video conference. Nathan's chair, at the far end of the table, remained conspicuously empty. Caroline slid into a seat on the opposite side, her posture notably straighter than usual, her face meticulously composed. "Thank you all for attending," Dr. Lawson began. "We have several critical items to address: succession planning, governance, the aftermath of the Metatron negotiations, and the formal definition of Ms. Harrington's new role." Dozens of eyes shifted towards me. I felt that old, familiar urge to shrink, to instinctively apologize for occupying space. I took a slow, deep breath and consciously let the feeling pass. "I am not applying to be CEO," I stated clearly, before anyone could even voice the question. "You require a physician at the helm. someone who understands operations from the inside. A flicker of faint relief passed across a few faces. However, I continued, I am fully prepared to assume responsibility for strategy, for shaping the future direction of Harrington Health, for rigorously ensuring we never again come this close to betraying our core mission. Dr. Lawson nodded slowly. Executive Strategy Chair. The title hung in the air for a moment, then settled into place with palpable weight. You would oversee long-term direction, he added. Technology integration, community commitments, risk safeguards. The board would formally report to you on those specific domains. The representatives on the screen murmured their approval. Caroline's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. We cannot construct a system run solely by algorithms. The vote to establish the Executive Strategy Chair position passed with an overwhelming 81% approval. When Dr. Lawson inquired if I would accept, I did not hesitate for an instant. Yes, I affirmed, on one critical condition. Albright raised an inquisitive eyebrow. Which is that we render my mother's priorities absolutely non-negotiable, I replied firmly. No merger, no partnership, and no restructuring can proceed if it in any way dismantles community care, charity access, or preventative health programs. Those crucial clauses must be enshrined in the bylaws, in explicit writing. A murmur of discomfort rippled around the table. Community care is inherently expensive, Caroline pointed out. It significantly drags down our margins. So does negative publicity, I retorted calmly. So do massive class action lawsuits. So does irrevocably losing the trust of the entire state. Her jaw clenched. Dr. Lawson cleared his throat. I unequivocally support incorporating those protections. Margaret fought valiantly for them. Elise is honorably upholding them. We will draft the precise language. For the first time since my childhood, I felt in profound sense that I had accomplished something in a room full of Harringtons that would have genuinely brought a smile to my mother's face. We proceeded through the remainder of the agenda. Nathan's termination package was reduced to the bare legal minimum. A decisive vote was cast to halt all ongoing negotiations with Metatron, and the formation of a dedicated search committee for a new CEO was initiated. When the meeting adjourned, people lingered. They approached me one by one, board members who had never bothered to learn my name, physicians who had once looked right through me in hospital hallways, administrators who had treated my contributions as optional, secondary add-ons. Elise, your presentation was truly eye-opening. I had no idea how far the merger would actually go. Your data on patient outcomes, we should have been diligently tracking that years ago. It wasn't adulation. It wasn't applause. It was something far simpler and, in many respects, infinitely more profound. It was genuine recognition. Nathan's downfall unfolded swiftly, then all at once. Within a single month, the state medical board launched a formal investigation into his professional conduct. Damaging questions emerged regarding whether his personal financial interests had unduly influenced referrals or skewed research priorities. Long-buried complaints, once discreetly filed away in internal records, resurfaced with renewed, intense scrutiny. A series of scathing articles followed. When legacy blinds leadership, when surgeons forget their oath, when family names aren't enough. Hospitals he once consulted for quietly severed their ties. Prestigious speaking engagements mysteriously vanished. Lucrative advisory roles evaporated into thin air. His name, once boldly printed on conference brochures, began to appear only in paragraphs discussing ethics and cautionary tales. I derived no pleasure from this aspect. I did not gloat. If anything, I observed his collapse with a kind of distant sorrow. Nathan had been insufferably arrogant, impossibly condescending. He had also been unequivocally brilliant. He possessed the potential to be extraordinary in ways that wouldn't have led to his own self-destruction. But brilliance untempered by humility is akin to a blade without a handle. Eventually, it invariably wounds the very individual attempting to wield it. Caroline's reckoning was a more subdued affair. An internal audit, triggered by the near-catastrophic Metatron incident, unearthed $2.3 million in misallocated funds during her tenure at Sierra Valley Medical Center. Money that had subtly drifted from charity budgets into executive perks and inflated bonuses. Nothing explicitly illegal, nothing overtly prosecutable, just undeniably unsightly. She was presented with a stark choice: resign entirely or accept a significant demotion coupled with stringent oversight. To my genuine surprise, she chose the latter. She relinquished her top executive post and accepted the role of deputy director. The professional circles that had once idolized her fell silent for a period. The deluge of conference invitations dried up. A scheduled Harvard panel quietly replaced her name with someone else's. For the initial few weeks, she actively avoided me. Then, one afternoon, I entered a small conference room at Sierra Valley to find her already present, intently studying a wall covered in charts. She glanced up. "Elise," she acknowledged, her tone neutral. "Caroline." She hesitated, then gestured towards the data on the wall. "These are your sentinel care projections." "Yes, they're impressive." The admission sounded foreign on her tongue. "Thank you," I replied simply. She returned her gaze to the charts, her arms loosely folded. "I spent so long trying to prove I could run this place better than Dad," she confided quietly, that I stopped asking whether I was running it right. It was the closest approximation of an apology I had ever heard from her. I didn't rush to fill the silence with comfort. I didn't minimize what had transpired. "I'm glad you're still here," I said instead. "We need people who understand the old system, provided they're willing to help construct the new one." Her mouth curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "I'm trying," she admitted. "Don't make it easy on me." "I won't," I replied. We both understood that an irreversible shift had occurred. We would never revert to the superficial version of sisterhood our family had once pretended we shared, but we might, someday, forge something far more honest and resilient in its place. The new CEO arrived 3 months thereafter. His name was Dr. Lucas Brennan, a soft-spoken physician possessing dual degrees in medicine and computer science, a resume replete with extensive clinical experience and groundbreaking innovation projects, and a reputation for actively listening far more than he spoke. In a different era, my father would have summarily dismissed him as excessively academic or overly theoretical. In this one, he may have been precisely what we desperately required. During our inaugural one-on-one meeting, he sat in my office, his hands loosely clasped, his eyes calm and assessing. "I read your case study," he began. "Harvard S?" I inquired. "Yes, the Harrington realignment. Legacy, technology, and the outsider in the boardroom." He smiled faintly. "They made you sound rather like a hurricane." I emitted a small, wry laugh. "I'd much prefer to be a pressure system, less dramatic, more structurally impactful." "I think you might be both," he countered. "Either way, I want you at the very heart of what we build next." He leaned forward slightly. "Medicine is rapidly evolving. We can either persist in pretending the antiquated ways are sustainable, or we can construct something that genuinely aligns with the intricate complexity of people's lives. I would much rather build." For the first time in an exceptionally long while, I felt the satisfying click of alignment, the sensation of sitting across from someone who was not threatened by my presence, not dismissive of my capabilities, not attempting to exploit me, someone who perceived the identical future I did. "Then let's commence work," I declared. And we did. We expanded Sentinel Care AI into every facility within the system. We joyfully reopened outreach clinics that had long been starved of essential funds. We seamlessly integrated telehealth services for patients residing hours away from the nearest hospital. We meticulously redesigned scheduling protocols so clinicians could dedicate more precious time to patients and less time wrestling with cumbersome software. It was chaotic, it was utterly exhausting. It was far from pretty, but it unequivocally worked. Within 2 fiscal quarters, patient satisfaction scores surged by 30%. Readmission rates plummeted. Staff burnout metrics demonstrably ticked downward. Grants began arriving from organizations that had previously written us off as an antiquated, inflexible institution. For the very first time, Harrington Health was not merely subsisting on its historical reputation. It was actively earning it. Healing did not manifest with some grand, climactic finale. It slipped in quietly, in moments I almost entirely overlooked. One particular morning, I awoke and instinctively did not reach for my phone to scrutinize the Harrington group chat. There were still messages, occasionally links to articles about our health system, lighthearted jokes exchanged between cousins, the same performance of closeness that had never quite fully embraced me. But I no longer felt a tightening knot in my stomach when I saw the notification. I muted the thread and continued with my day, unburdened. Another afternoon, I presented a comprehensive 5-year roadmap for Harrington Health. I spoke with authority, answered challenging questions, and confidently challenged long-held assumptions. Halfway through, I realized that no one in the room was waiting for me to justify my belonging. They were simply waiting to hear what came next. For someone who had spent years speaking from the very periphery of every table, that subtle shift felt almost surreal. Therapy proved invaluable, too. Sitting opposite Dr. Martinez week after week, I finally granted myself permission to be something other than perpetually composed. We meticulously unpacked the long, painful history of my family's subtle cruelties, the way affection was inextricably tied to accolades, how effortlessly love transmuted into leverage, how frequently I had accepted being the punchline because it felt safer than being perceived as the problem. What if you were never the one who failed them? She once inquired. What if they failed you? The question landed with the jarring clarity of a diagnosis I had been unconsciously circling for years. If that is true, I articulated slowly, then I constructed my entire life around attempting to rectify the wrong thing. She nodded empathetically. You were never broken, Elise, merely misread. The anger I had harbored did not magically dissipate, but it settled. It ceased its furious blazing and began to glow instead. A steady, comforting warmth that gently reminded me of my origins without incinerating everything in its path. Grief, too, transformed. Its razor sharpness dulled. My mother's absence persisted, but it felt less like an unstitched wound and more like a cherished scar I could trace without completely unraveling. Outside the confines of the hospital walls, my world expanded in ways I had never consciously planned. Harvard Business School published an extensive case study about us, aptly titled The Harrington Pivot: Legacy, Technology, and the Outsider in the Boardroom. I read it alone in my kitchen, a mix of amusement and stunned disbelief at seeing my entire life meticulously flattened into neat bullet points. Invitations swiftly followed. Business schools eagerly sought my insights on governance. Medical schools desired my expertise on sentinel care. Tech conferences wanted to discuss the profound implications of someone like me entering a family empire and steadfastly refusing to adhere to the old, dusty script. Then came the TED Talk. I almost declined. Some ingrained reflex still insisted that I was inherently better suited to standing discreetly in the background, maintaining the systems, keeping the lights reliably illuminated while someone else commanded the microphone. But my mother had written a potent letter and staked an entire future on the profound idea that my voice genuinely mattered. So, I accepted. The talk was provocatively titled, When Your Family Cannot See Your Future. I recounted the very story I am sharing with you now, condensed into a powerful 18 minutes beneath a vibrant red circle and brilliant stage lights. When the video debuted online, people watched. 5 million, 10 million, and counting. The sheer numbers, however, held less significance than the deluge of comments. My parents constantly tell me I'm squandering my potential because I refuse to be a doctor like them. I'm the sole artist in a family comprised entirely of engineers. They genuinely believe I'm merely playing. I always assumed being the odd one out meant something was inherently wrong with me. I saw reflections of myself in all of them. Younger, uncertain, desperately yearning for someone to unequivocally state that desiring a different path did not render me ungrateful or fundamentally flawed. Whenever feasible, I replied, "You are not defective. You are simply facing a horizon they are incapable of perceiving." The messages continued to pour in, so I initiated something small. Once a month, I hosted a free online session I christened the Outlier Circle. No corporate branding, no Harrington logo, no corporate spin, just a simple link, a designated time, and whoever chose to attend. The first session, 12 faces appeared on my screen. By the third month, there were nearly 100. Eager students, dedicated junior employees, individuals mid-career, all carrying the same quiet ache. My family has a pre-written script for my life, and I simply don't fit within it. We conversed about guilt and establishing healthy boundaries, about how to cultivate robust support networks outside the very structures that were supposed to offer safety, but often failed. We discussed the immense difficulty of persistently walking towards a future no one in your immediate household believes is real. It didn't make the national news. It didn't inflate market capitalization. But in a way I cannot quite articulate, it felt like another vital piece of the promise I owed my mother. Not just to transform a flawed system, but to ensure fewer individuals were needlessly crushed by one. At Harrington Health, the monumental changes we had initiated took deep root under Dr. Brennan's inspired leadership. Our 3 brand-new community wellness centers triumphantly opened, one in a secluded rural town that had tragically lost its only clinic years prior, one in a historically overlooked urban neighborhood, and one near Harbor Point Bay, where hardworking families had been quietly priced out of essential care. The day the Margaret Harrington Community Wellness Pavilion welcomed its inaugural patients, I drove out and sat discreetly in the lobby, pretending to be an ordinary observer. A woman of no particular importance. A woman in her 60s entered, visibly nervous and apologetic, as if her very presence was an inconvenience to the staff. She had not consulted a doctor in almost a decade. Sentinel Care's advanced system flagged a subtle anomaly in her initial scans. Further diagnostic tests detected an aggressive cancer early enough for successful treatment. She clutched the doctor's hands with both of hers and whispered, "Thank you," over and over, tears streaming down her face. I managed to reach my car before I finally broke down and wept. That was the precise moment it crystallized with poignant clarity. Everything that had transpired at the Kingswell Ballroom, every board vote cast, every article published, it all culminated in this. A woman who would now live years she might have otherwise tragically lost. All because my mother trusted me with crucial ownership papers instead of empty apology speeches. The rest of my family gradually rearranged themselves around this new reality as best they could. Some relatives brazenly reinvented history. "We always knew you, Dee achieved something monumental," an uncle declared at a fundraiser, conveniently overlooking the years he'd openly mocked my little tech projects. A cousin who had once literally blocked my view of a presentation slide now sent a lengthy email proposing we co-found an innovation lab. Another brazenly inquired if I could introduce his son to Andrew Mercer. I was polite. I was unavailable. My rule remained simple. If you couldn't truly see me before the Kingswell Assembly, you certainly didn't get to capitalize on me afterward. There were, however, exceptions. Lee, who had texted me from her grueling night shift while my mother was dying, regularly came over for dinner. We discussed broken triage systems, the exhaustion of overworked bodies, and the small, vital acts of kindness that prevent nurses from completely falling apart. Her brother, Ethan, sent a shaky message after the shareholder revolt. "I'm proud of you," he wrote. "If you'll have me, I want to help fix what's broken instead of pretending it is." So, I integrated him into various projects, introduced him to individuals who genuinely prioritized both medicine and ethics, and observed as he slowly evolved into the kind of doctor our family would eventually boast about for all the right reasons. Some branches of the Harrington family tree were truly worth pruning and diligently nurturing. Others, I simply allowed to grow far away from my own. A year following my mother's passing, I drove to Cedar Stone Memorial Park with a small, fragrant bouquet of lavender resting on the passenger seat. The cemetery was peacefully quiet that morning. Soft light filtered through the tall trees in delicate, warm ribbons. Her headstone was simple and robust, precisely as she had wished. Margaret Harrington, surgeon, advocate, mother. She believed care should reach everyone. I knelt, gently brushed away a few fallen leaves, and carefully placed the flowers down. "Hi, Mom," I whispered. "We accomplished a great deal this year." I recounted Nathan's ongoing investigation, and the thin, stunned expression on his face the last time we briefly crossed paths in a hallway. About Caroline's demotion and her careful, somewhat awkward attempts at doing the right thing without the bright spotlight she once craved. About Dr. Brennan, the empowered board, the flourishing new clinics, the impressive numbers that finally aligned with the deeply held values she had never stopped defending. I told her about the grateful woman at the pavilion, about the community of outliers on the other side of my laptop screen, About the mornings, when I now awakened feeling more excited than afraid. I think you'd approve, I whispered softly. It looks remarkably similar to what you were striving to construct when no one bothered to listen. A gentle breeze rustled through the branches, cool and soft against my face. I understand that weather is simply weather, but I allowed myself to interpret it as an answer nonetheless. I remained there until my legs ached from kneeling, then slowly stood, pressed my palm gently against the top of the cool stone, and articulated the words I had needed to speak for a very long time. I'll keep going, you did your part, I'm doing mine. If you arrived here seeking a neat, tidy moral, I'm afraid I don't possess one. Families do not miraculously snap into perfect formation simply because one individual finally finds the courage to stand tall. Empires do not remain fixed and flawless just because a single vote went your way. There are still challenging meetings, still necessary compromises, still nights when I lie awake, wondering if I possess sufficient strength to continue upholding a line my mother once defended entirely alone. But there is this immutable truth. I no longer quantify my worth by who applauds when I enter a room. I no longer entrust my future to individuals who only recognize one narrow type of excellence. I no longer perceive my inherent differences as a flaw. When I now traverse the halls of Harrington Health, I perceive far more than just a family name meticulously carved into cold stone. I see vibrant clinics that exist because someone resolutely refused to bargain them away. I see dedicated doctors and nurses equipped with superior tools and carrying perceptibly lighter burdens on their shoulders. I see countless patients whose stories are no longer abruptly curtailed by systems that once failed them. And somewhere within all of that, I feel the comforting presence of my mother. Not as a spectral ghost I'm striving to live up to, but as a steadfast presence just behind my shoulder. Steady, quiet, endlessly patient. If any segment of my story resonates with yours, if you are the unconventional one, the silent observer, the individual your relatives consistently talk over, I want you to hear this message with absolute clarity. You are not here to meticulously complete their asterisk picture. You are here to boldly draw your own asterisk. For years, I mistakenly believed that being the outlier Harrington rendered me the weakest link in the chain. Now I possess a deeper understanding. I was never the